Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Wayland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Footsteps sound on the packed dirt of the road leading into Carm Fay Bin, the local province's hub of commerce. And by hub, I mean that the smell of pigs is lighter here than it is outside the rickety line of sticks they call a wall. The footsteps get louder in the darkness, and a small child, Gabriella, peeks through the shutters in their cottage to see a group of 4 enter the town. The cold moonlight shines down on them as they trudge into the center of the street, and strangely they turn, walking right up to Gabriella's very own door. She quickly calls back into the home. "Company! 4 strangers!" Just as she speaks, 4 distinct knocks sound on the door. Her mother walks into the room, something held behind her back, and she slowly goes to the door. "How can I help you?" she asks through the closed door. "We came for directions. We are looking for lodging and also a place to eat," a gruff voice says from the outside. "You were the first house with a light on, so we thought we'd ask." Gabriella takes a chance to crack the window, and from it she sees 4 figures. The light from the fire inside shines through the crack and lands on a beard. A short figure turns to the light, and Gabriella catches a glimpse of a twinkling eye that winks. She quickly closes the window and giggles, until she sees that her mother is holding a cleaver in her hand. "Well," said the mother, "it is awfully late to be looking for directions. If you must know, Carter's Inn and Pub are just around the corner, to the right of here, if you're coming from out of town. You can get help there." Through the door comes a thank you and an apology. "Sorry to have scared you, ma'am. Have a good night. Let us know if we can make it up to you in any way. Just ask for Harquette's party at the inn." The steps recede. As they both listen, the mother lets out a sigh. She raises her hand to her brow, wiping sweat. "Gabby, you need to tell me earlier when you hear someone coming." As the mother goes to the window and stares out, she sees nothing. That night they go to bed, and Gabriella thinks about the strangers and the bearded man with the twinkling eye. For some reason, despite her mother's actions, Gabriella felt safe. As she drifted off to a peaceful sleep for the first time in weeks, she wondered if those strangers could maybe make everyone else in the town feel safe too. This is How to Be a Better DM. Thanks for listening to today's show. My name is Tanner Wayland, and I'm very excited to talk with you today about all things DM. Well, not all things. Today's topic is something specific, but regardless, very excited to talk with you about how you can plan D&D campaigns. First off, we'd like to thank you, though, for the support that you guys have given us. We love seeing how many of you are listening, and also any messages we get from you. We really appreciate. As you know, we are still trying to send out those newsletters every month, and we do plan on having our quarterly one-shot D&D sessions. It should be coming up in September. If you would like to play that, there's going to be a link in the description where you can sign up for our newsletter, and on there is a link to sign up for the one-shot. It's first come, first serve. Sorry. So sign up quickly. If we don't get you in on this one, then we'll definitely try and get you in on a future one. But either way, definitely reach out. Otherwise, let's get right into it. As I said earlier, we're going to be talking about planning D&D campaigns. Now, when I say campaign, typically what I mean is it's not a one shot. It's not where someone comes to your house or you go to someone else's house. And you have like a 3 or 4 hour adventure, and then that's it, right? That's not what this is. Instead, a campaign is about having multiple sessions which kind of build on each other, right? Your players will have the same characters, unless, of course, 1 or 2 die, at which point they'll switch into new characters. And it's kind of like a long-form D&D story. Now, the issue with it being long-form is that, honestly, if you're like me, you can get paralyzed by indecision, because you might be like, hey, I want to do campaign, but there's so much to consider, and that can maybe paralyze you with indecision. On the other hand, maybe it's not paralyzing at all. Maybe you're like, yeah, I'll just wing it. But then the issue with that is that sometimes, if you wing an adventure, if you're just doing it off the cuff, then the quality sometimes falls, right? And so with that being said, I think it's very important to, plan ahead, right? Plan what you're going to be doing. But before you can plan in depth, you need to make some decisions, right? Because not all campaigns are created the same. They have different scope, different goals, not even just goals for the players, but goals for you as a DM, or your DMing style goals, right? We really encourage that as a DM on this podcast. We really encourage you that you think about how you interact with players and what kind of stories you tell. And so the first decision when you're planning a campaign is to ask yourself, okay, for my DMing style this time, am I planning on railroading my players? As in, I'm going to come up like step by step what they're going to be doing. I'm going to make a super great story and fights and everything, and it's going to be very scripted. And that's the kind of campaign I'm going to do, right? That's not typically the one I like to do, but I like to script certain things. And you need to realize that if you're planning a campaign, you can't just expect to plan everything and then still give your players freedom, right? It just doesn't quite work like that. You can plan certain things, maybe an outline for the adventure, certain specific moments. But in many ways, because it's D&D and because it's a wonderful game that allows player interaction, maybe player meddling, if you're kind of a campaign purist and you're like, hey, I wrote a beautiful campaign, stick to it. That's going to be hard to do. But if you do plan for that, you're going to want to talk with your players about it and be like, hey, can you create a very specific character that fits in with this story? Now, if you do that, then you can probably have more of a scripted campaign, and it would work pretty well, right? Now, most DMs are going to do kind of a hybrid, right? They're not going to go completely loosey-goosey, because there is that option too, where you just start out the adventure in a location. It could be a tavern, could be the countryside, could be a cave, on a ship, who knows what. And then just kind of let the players go from there. and the DM just has some general world characteristics and towns and events, and they'll just kind of throw them wherever the player happens to be, right? That's a totally valid way to do it. Most often, the way I've seen how most people do it, they will plan, an outline. They'll have certain things planned and certain major goals that they're going to have NPCs kind of push the characters towards. But otherwise, they'll allow the players a certain amount of autonomy to do what they want. And then the DM just has to work that in, right? So regardless, so once you decide what kind of style or DM style you're going to be embracing for the campaign, the next thing to decide is how big of a campaign are you looking for, right? And I mean this in two different ways. One, length of time, actual real length of time. For these players that you've gathered, are they committed? Like, are they going to be there months from now? Or are they just thinking, hey, we're off of school for the summer, or, we're going to be here for a couple months, a little bit more open from work or whatever. Let's do a campaign. In that case, you really don't have as much time as you think, right? Now, if it's people, close friends or family who live close, they have guaranteed, hey, once a week or once every other week, we have this night set apart, and we can just do this for a long time, and, we can always reschedule, but we plan on sticking with it. If that's the case, then you can honestly make the length and breadth of your campaign can be pretty big, right? Now, another kind of more story important decision is, okay, with this campaign, are you making it world shattering? If your characters, are they starting level 1, going all the way to level 20 where they're fighting the big bad, capital T, capital B, where, you're saving everybody in the world? That works for some campaigns. But sometimes, especially if you have a shorter length of time, then you're going to need to make the actual size of your story or the impact of your story a little bit closer to home, right? Maybe they don't solve the entire world's issues. Maybe they just solve the issues for their town, their hometown. Maybe they just oust the local king of a small country. Or they go into one kind of longer dungeon and they finish that, right? Any of those options are solid. But before you get out of control with planning, you do want to have a grasp on what you plan on doing, right? I've started and not finished a number of campaigns because I just didn't plan enough, or maybe I didn't plan realistically enough on what my players could handle, frankly speaking, right? So once you've made these decisions, you're then going to want to interweave your players' characters' backstories and motivations. And now, when I was mentioning decisions you have to make, you'll notice I didn't make this a decision because, frankly speaking, even if you are kind of making a more scripted a campaign, you should plan on interweaving your players' characters, life goals, everything, right? Because otherwise you're going to have a lot of uninterested players who don't feel like all the work they put into their characters actually meant anything. And maybe, I think the goal is always to have your players care about their characters and their goals, because that leads to better combats, better role playing, more interaction and concentration while you're doing everything. And so what you need to do is have a session 0 with each player, talk about it through their ideas already with the character, and then kind of share bits and pieces of the campaign that you have planned. And that's why you need to kind of plan ahead certain things, right? So that you can find out, one, okay, is the campaign and this character's goals and motivations, are they compatible? And if they're a little bit incompatible, you personally can change the adventure a little bit, or you can give some suggestions to the player and be like, hey, so this is kind of the adventure we're having. It's an ocean adventure where we're going to essentially fantasy equivalent of Atlantis, right? Or something like that, or space, or who knows what. And this is kind of the main, these are some of the events relevant to the story. You can give tidbits like that to your players and give suggestions for how their character could tie into the story better. And if you do that, you're going to avoid having some players that just don't fit, right? Now, an important thing, and honestly, I would actually recommend doing this before you talk with your players about their characters. I think, well, you could do it either way, really. But it's important around this step to find out what the end point of the adventure is, right? When I mention a big bad or a goal, it's not always a big villain. Sometimes it could be a natural disaster or something, right? There's obviously going to be fights and some villains along the way, maybe some bigger ones, but you just need to find out, okay, in order to find out where your characters are starting, you kind of need to see where they are going to be ending. And no one can decide that except you, right? Because you're the DM, you're the one whose job it is to plan the most exciting adventure you can. So after you come up with an endpoint and kind of adjust the campaign and your ideas to fit in the characters, and now it's just up to you to create the campaign. And my personal recommendation is do not overplan this step. Now, what does that mean? I don't mean don't plan at all, right? Because that's a bad idea. Instead, what I mean is do an outline. And a great way to do an outline for campaigns, it's similar to how you would write a book, or at least how an English teacher would analyze a book, which is you create kind of story arcs or adventure arcs for different, pre-written campaigns that you might get online or in books or different modules. They often have certain campaign arcs built in, little sections. Like there's the section where you're on a boat traveling up a river. There's the section where you are going into some forsaken mines or a dungeon. There's a section where you're oftentimes, they'll have the section right at the start of the adventure where you're in a small town and there's some specific event going on, right? It's kind of the intro. So like the arc can start out pretty small. And that's another thing to keep in mind. Generally with campaigns, you want to build to a crescendo or a climax. So the climax is obviously going to be the most intense time. Building up to that, you can have smaller arcs, smaller adventures, middle-sized ones, and then save your longer, more impactful ones for near the end of the adventure when your players are, they've hit their stride. Their characters are just killing it. And then after that, after you've planned these arcs, generally, interweaving the player's characters, goals and aspirations, and then also building towards that endpoint you planned. At that point, you just need to plan the start. Now, I said don't do over planning, and that's mostly for everything except the start. For the start, I think it's very important to plan the heck out of it, because that's when your players are still kind of, they haven't stuck to the adventure, They're still, in many ways, no matter what they say, they're still trying it out. They're still seeing, hey, is this a cool campaign that I can really see jiving with, being interested in, going a long time playing? And so that's why I say for the first number of sessions in the first arc of your campaign, make sure that it's so well planned out that they're getting everything that a player could want. They're getting some tie into their personal stories. Not too much, obviously, because that needs to build as well for later in the story. But enough that they're like, hey, I have a place in this campaign world that you've created. They also need to feel like, hey, their characters have very fun combats and also fun interactions with NPCs. So it's a great time to introduce some very key, hilarious, and also maybe terrifying or engrossing NPCs at the start. And so once you do that, once you do each of those steps, then at that point, you can take it step by step. You've already done the work beforehand to find out each of your players' characters' backgrounds and work that in. You know the ending, generally. It's going to get tweaked a little bit depending on their decisions. You've created arcs along the way. And guess what? If you need to drop one of those arcs, that's fine, because you were doing an outline at this point, right? You didn't overplan it, so you're not so stuck in planning for that arc, one of the later ones, to the point that you couldn't drop it if thematically it wasn't appropriate anymore. And then you're going to have a great few first sessions. Your players are going to love it, and it's going to really do a lot for you. In all honesty, planning a campaign can be very daunting. If I could leave you with one thought, it's that your players would rather be playing rather than having you stressed out. And so don't get too stressed at the start. Talk with your players, have them work on creating their player characters, and then you just do a general plan, and then plan well, for each upcoming session. You'll do great. I know you will. You're going to have such a great time on your campaign. And otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful time DMing. And I think it's time to roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.